Well, good morning, everyone. I hope you can see me and I hope you can hear me using all of our technology here this morning. Welcome to the annual BVU Business Summit. I'm Bill Premer. I'm chairman of the board of the BVU Board of Directors and also the CEO of Highland, the software company. Thank you very much for making the time to join us this morning. I hope you've been holding up okay in this very strange and often stressful time. You know, perhaps you can relate to this. The last 6 weeks I've been at work. I've been extremely busy, but at home I've had to find more ways to fill up my time. So I'm reading more. I used to like to read and got out of the habit, and now I'm reading more. I picked up my guitar again. I'm getting pretty proficient at ping pong. But in the hobby category, I have a daughter who's absolutely putting me to shame. She's in her senior year in high school. So she's moved so she started off making crystals, and then she turned to making soap, and then she was tie-dyeing, then she was cake decorating, and now she's gemming, which I don't know, I hadn't heard of. It's like attaching these synthetic stones to these patterns. So in any case, she's a lot more productive than me in the sheltering environment. But maybe that's a generational thing too that maybe we'll have some time for this morning. In any case, I'm very glad we decided not to cancel or delay this event and instead conduct it virtually like we are. It's like so many other aspects, I think, of our lives and our organizations. They're really beneficial, they're really important, and they need to continue even if in a modified way. And that's true for all of the programs that BVU runs, whether that's our board matching, our team volunteer projects, our pro bono consulting, our nonprofit consulting. There's never been a more important time for businesses and nonprofits to come together and to collaborate, because when they do, tremendous things happen. Our nonprofit members become stronger and more effective at delivering the services and support that's so needed by our community, and our business members benefit by giving their employees the opportunity to be more engaged and to give back. And you know this, many would say that nothing is as fulfilling or as energizing as helping someone else. And it's absolutely the case. I know it's true for my company that our employees recognize and appreciate when we support them in doing just that and being engaged and giving back. We all know that employees have a wide range of interests as well, and ways that they want to engage. And again, at Highland, we see differences among all kinds of groups, including those in different age groups, life stages, and generations. You know, I recognize in my 24 years with Highland how my own attitudes and preferences have changed over that course of time. We tend to talk about diversity and inclusion, I think more in terms of, gender and race and culture, but the dynamics around generational differences are really interesting. And, on one hand can be detrimental to a company culture to ignore them, but it can be, on the other hand, really powerful to recognize those differences and leverage them. I now find myself, in my 50s, being really delightfully challenged and enlightened and inspired by my colleagues who are joining Highland in their 20s. And maybe that's not dissimilar from the inspiration I'm getting from my daughter at home. So I think we've chosen a great topic for today's summit: viewing employee engagement through a multi-generational lens. We certainly have a great panel of speakers, and I think our time together, connected virtually, will be really, really worthwhile. So thanks again for being here. And now I'm going to turn it over to the CEO of BVU, Brian Broadbent.
Well, thank you, Bill. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank you for your generosity and Highland. Highland's one of our big business members, and they do a little of everything in the community. It's wonderful. So we thank you for that. Well, this is our 4th business summit. We used to have a number of summits regarding purpose at work, and last year was the UN sustainability goals. And this year we've changed it up with the generations. And it's interesting, this whole virus thing came on top of us after we had chosen the topic. But we decided, for the reasons Bill mentioned, to keep going with it. But the world's, obviously changed a lot on it. And another thank you that I want to send out is to our speakers, because they were very flexible. Hank Cardello, who's our keynote, you'll hear in a minute, Lorna Wisham, Kelly Keefe, who are going to be part of our panel with Hank, have just been, very, very flexible. And I also want to thank and recognize our sponsors for this event, because when we weren't going to have a face-to-face meeting, we decided, you know what, we want to see if they wanted to stay in there, with us. And they all agreed to continue, even though we were doing a webinar type of setting, which is a very selfless gesture. So thank you to Falls Communications, Kat Kaloji in particular, Bill at Highland, Nordson Corporation, GBX, KeyBank, and Jones Day that are supporting sponsors. I mean, these companies do a lot to the community. They help a lot of people go through the board matching, and they've sponsored us, for years, and we're just very grateful for that. So let's kind of state the obvious right now. With the amount of uncertainty that's going on, we really don't know how things are going to look in 3 months, 12 months, 36 months. And I think, because I looked at the number of people that are on the call, many of you know us very well. And BVU is this connection between the businesses and the nonprofit sector. It's a broad mission. And with the virus world that we're in right now, it's going to be particularly complex and really needed to strengthen the community because boards are going to have great needs, consulting and other things. And you'll see some evidence in this in a minute. But it's more complex in how we link businesses to nonprofits. So we did a quick survey and asked, and this was when the crisis hit, to the nonprofits. And we thought the business leaders there on the call would have an interest in seeing this. But the first question was, are you going to need volunteers, and that is now during the crisis? Because there's a national statistic that's not on this slide, but 93% of nonprofits that use volunteers, those volunteer efforts have been crippled. Either they've had to shut off their volunteer program. I'm on the board chair of the city mission, and we have hundreds of volunteers at the city mission, and we can't have any right now. Or they had to significantly curtail their volunteer efforts because people can't come in and meet and work shoulder to shoulder the way they have in the past. So you can see that the questions were asked were pretty simple, but 11% of nonprofits can still deliver on their full mission. 89% can't, and their mission's been compromised in one way or another. You can see 80% of nonprofits lost revenue, and 24% have either begun terminations of employees or furloughs. And by the way, that's for this point in time. Many told us in the notes comments of the survey said, yeah, we're not furloughing or terminating yet, but it's on the horizon. So that number is going to jump up. Next slide, please. And then we were asking, is the board helping you during this process? And almost 70% of boards are assisting in some significant way. That number should even be higher. But there may be situations the board can't help. We're not sure, but that was an interesting number. And then scenario planning is really important for these financial scenarios, because cash is king right now with nonprofits. And almost 3/4 of nonprofits have financial roadmaps and scenarios. They're doing all the what if analysis that you need. And about 1/4 still haven't done it yet, but I'll probably will in time. Okay, next slide, please. And then you can see that 72% have cut programs or services, which you saw in that other statistic. 2/3 have had to cancel events. Really the spring events have really gone away. Almost 80% went after the SBA loans that are being hopefully granted to the nonprofits. And a very interesting statistic is 78%, almost 4/5, said that their organization is going to look very different after this is done. And so those were some very interesting statistics. It was a quick little snapshot done 2 weeks ago, but it gives you a sense of where we are with the nonprofits. Another data point was something we did last week. We invited nonprofits to access a program BVU has with our fellowship. And fellows are people who retire from businesses and are willing to lend their expertise to help out nonprofits. They'll do HR, IT, finance, just change management, launching service offerings, big projects, like 200 to 1,000 hours. And in this time, we decided to, because of the generosity of the Cleveland Foundation, to offer these fellows for free. And we typically would do 10 over the course of a year. Well, in a 24-hour period, 19 requests came in asking for fellows to help out during this period when we said it was free. But it speaks to the demand that the nonprofit sector has for significant projects. So there's a real call to action right now. And so that's why we're delighted that you've joined us today and can think about this. We know at some point business will get back to some sense of normality, but the nonprofit sector is really going to be hurt even after this, because even with the SBA loans and grants, cash reserves are going to be depleted. They'll likely had to control expenses by closing programs, reducing staff. I mean, you all know the story. And so this topic of ways to engage generations to help the community really comes at a vital time. And we want you to participate in this session. And so a couple of housekeeping things. You can do that by going into the live discussion box that is below. And so please ask questions and we'll take care of those. We have a couple of good prizes that are being offered at the end, thanks to our sponsor, GBX Corporation and Falls Communications. And they're very nice prizes, but you've got to be part of the discussion to be eligible for the prizes. So think of something to say in the discussion box. And we'll have a raffle kind of at the end and announce who the winners are. Before I review the agenda, we have a polling question right here for you. So we want to know who's on the call. There were supposed to be a little over 100 of us, plus the BVU staff, that we're going to be attending today. So it's a great number. But could you identify yourself? Are you Generation Z, you know, the people born 97 to 2012, a millennial, 81 to 96, Gen Xers, or baby boomers 46 to 64? So we just wanted to get a sense of the ages that are involved. We'll let you know those results here in a minute. The other thing for the agenda, it's going to be pretty straightforward. We'll have you, will be completed a little after 10 o'clock. But you heard from Bill, you've heard from me. Hank Cardello is going to be talking about generational differences. And he's really our keynote to launch this. And then we have a really good panel, which are going to be business leaders to help us understand how they're dealing with this. And that includes Lorna Wisham, who's from First Energy, and then Kelly Keefe from ERC, as well as Hank. And Allison Kimbrough of the BVU staff is going to facilitate that. We're going to give you a break in the middle between those two things, so you can get up and do a bio break, refresh your coffee, or whatever you'd like to do. As always, follow us on Twitter at BVU Volunteers. That'd be the next slide, if you would. And we urge you just to continue the conversation, share information on social media, and you can do that through hashtag BVU Leadership Now, which we would appreciate. Okay, so let's see if I can get the polling questions. Well, I'll have to give it to you in a minute. I don't see them right off. But let me do this. I'll report back on that after we hear from Hank. So Hank Cardello. Hank, excuse me, is a senior fellow with the Hudson Institute. It's a leading think tank in Washington, D.C. And he was specifically recommended by Falls Communications and Kat Kalogi. So Kat, thank you very much for recommending Hank. It's been delightful to get to know him. He's an author and regular contributor at Forbes magazine. He's led expert panels at the White House. He's been involved with different media outlets like CNN, NPR, and the BBC. I'm sure you heard of all of those, as well as the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and Washington Post. Business-wise, he was a former executive with Coca-Cola, General Mills, and Cadbury Schweppes, and he was a CEO of two companies during that time. The reason we are interested in having Hank present is that right now he's guiding corporations in understanding opportunities across different consumer and generational segments. So that's why he ties into the generations very nicely. And he develops leadership strategies to grow their businesses while addressing different society needs. So what Hank is going to do is really two things. He's going to certainly address generations, but he's also going to address the elephant in the room with leadership, dealing with this, the virus, and what we might need to do as a business leader. So Hank, turn it over to you, but we really appreciate your leadership on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian, so much. Thank you for the invitation this morning. Let me just get my slides up there and get things going. And there we go. So thank you for the kind invitation. And I don't know if I could add much more than Bill or Brian about these very trying times and unusual times. But for all the challenges we're facing, it also unearths many new insights and perhaps opportunities coming out of the tunnel, as you see here. And what I want to talk about today is a new kind of leadership model, and that's social impact leadership, and the appeal that has across generations for both your businesses and organizations, again, corporations and nonprofits, that could really make a difference. And so what I'm going to talk about today, again, no doubt we are in a new reality, and I want to talk about how the coronavirus has impacted three crucial elements of life: the concerns for health and wellness, the concerns about our planet, environment, sustainability, and also the changing workplace dynamics. In other words, all these were factors before, and now they get exacerbated now, and there is some change. And then what I'll go into is provide some insights and case studies on the implications for both corporate and nonprofit leadership, and then go through the new leadership model I mentioned. So again, nothing you don't know. Our world is very, very different right now. Wall Street, we've seen financial problems, even though it's rebounding now. April looks like it's going to be very ugly. We have huge unemployment. And of course, the real tragedy are we have 60,000 people who perished as a result of this. That really is the real tragedy, and we can't lose sight of that. You know, the economic disruption is incredible. It's unprecedented. Empty stadiums, airplanes, and cruise ships parked, restaurants closed. Everything is different. Usually on Thursday mornings about this time, they come out with the new jobless claims. As of last week, it was over 26 million. Again, we haven't ever seen that. So it's a brave new world. And then on top of that, you have our existing societal problems, again, get compounded, whether it's climate change, pollution, income inequality, the problems with poor diets and our health. And in fact, what we see is the linkage of these don't live in isolation. We're actually seeing COVID-19 show the links between what we've been doing and the disease and what happens in these arenas. So example, we find in a New York study that those almost 50% of those who had died from COVID-19 in a New York hospital, 48% of them were with obesity. So again, you're starting to see some linkage. The same with income inequality, the access to healthcare, the access to healthy foods. So it all seems to be this unusual confluence of events. So what I'm going to talk about, we'll go through each one of these and drill down in a little bit more detail and talk about, you know, these were issues before COVID-19, but how did how did coronavirus change this and the insights coming out of these, and more importantly, why social impact leadership is so important and an opportunity to really think hard about. So let me first start with health and well-being. These are the ugly facts. Almost 40% of U.S. adults with obesity. 9 states now have obesity levels over 35%. Only Colorado and D.C. are under 25%. And again, I just mentioned that it's COVID-19 is really harming those. It's a comorbidity of having obesity and diabetes with the disease. When you look by generation, millennials tend to lead the way for healthy foods, but what we also do, we also look at attitudinal segments, and what we really find is that those who really clamor the most for healthier foods are not only millennials, but also baby boomers tend to be higher levels of education and income. And in contrast, there are millennials, generally younger male millennials, who we lovingly call the eat, drink, and be merries, that could care less. So we can't do a one-size-fits-all on this, but in general, the younger generations are leading the trend towards eating healthier. And of course, all this momentum to healthier eating is on hiatus right now. This is what we're finding. These kind of products are what are being consumed. These comfort foods are being purchased right now. You don't see people hoarding broccoli right now. This is what they're eating in the short term. But what I expect coming out of this is that because we're kind of naked dealing with coronavirus, immunity is starting to become a big buzzword across all generations. We're seeing a movement to plant-based foods. I expect that to be exacerbated by the problems we're finding in meat plants, the concern for the safety of the workers, in addition to concern about the safety of the products coming out of this. And of course, restaurants, they will start opening, but people will be separated. And of course, the supplement industry, I expect to really take off. Any product that even smacks of immunity will actually do well. And then when you look at millennials, there's also now this crossover linkage between diets and what else it brings, like mental health and to benefit the environment. You see, again, millennials leading the charge here. To improve my mental health and to reduce my impact on the planet. These are the reasons now why people are improving their diets, not just to eat healthier. There's secondary benefits attached to it. So with that, we'll transition into planet and sustainability. And we're finding that almost 60% of consumers are either very alarmed or concerned about global warming. And again, the same kind of trends apply to the alarmed and the concerned. They're primarily millennials and younger, certainly Gen Z, but also the higher income, more educated baby boomers are driving this. And it's a big number. This says this is real. You would normally expect these numbers to be smaller, but once you get to 60%, it's a real issue. And interestingly, the alarm segment is actually more likely to reward or punish, in this case, food companies for their environmental actions, meaning that they are likely not to purchase products if they don't agree with what a company's doing, or they'll blog about it, or they'll hit social media, talk to their friends and neighbors. It's very proactive right now with this group. And these are the folks also I see in Washington, D.C. on the policy side. They're driving a lot of the policy changes. So this is real. So again, this is a message to organizations that you must pay attention to these things. And then when we look across the causes, how different generations talk about the causes of climate change, you can see the younger you get, millennials, Gen Z, they say it's due to human activity, whereas the older generations are more likely, not totally, but more likely to say it's due to natural patterns. So you see these differences changing over the age groups and the generations. Now, COVID-19 actually, ironically, has helped the environment. The trend, and this is a January chart here, protecting the environment and dealing with climate change, we're going up pretty sharply. People saying, yes, these are important issues. You're talking 50, 60%. And what's fascinating is when you look, this is Europe, then you can see on the top one, a year ago, what the nitrogen dioxide levels were in Europe and what they look like now. And basically, they're down about 50%. And you can see that, you know, is there a linkage as you look at northern Italy and Milan, all that pollution that they've been taking in, does that affect their ability to fight off illness? So again, this is a trend that I expect to continue in the sense that I do think consumers and people will want the environment to be cleaner. They're a lot more aware, along with the immune notion that I brought up earlier. And then finally, I want to do a little bit more of a drill down on the workplace. You know, you're really dealing with 5 generations of work, with the primary ones, boomers, Gen X, and millennial. And just to quickly go through these, traditionalists are, you know, born before the end of World War II. And, you know, work is very straightforward. You stay for life, slow and steady progression. With boomers, they're kind of the same in the sense that they want job security, but there's more of a values play here, and they want upward mobility. And at this stage, as boomers become older, they actually look forward to a role where they can serve as mentors and actually are interested in doing more projects that might play to their legacy and give them more, what should I say, more value in the community. So that we're seeing that pop up with baby boomers. Gen X, this is the new sandwich generation, if you would. They're really squeezed in financially. You know, they have parents now that are starting to age. They have children. This is the group that has the most children in the household, and somewhat for millennials, but really Gen X. And they crave work-life balance. And more interestingly, from a work environment standpoint, they want autonomy. They don't really want somebody sitting on top of them. They don't necessarily take a casual aspect. They're very problem solution oriented, but they do like that independence and autonomy. And they're not necessarily job hoppers, but you know, money and compensation is important, and they like to know their options. And then there's our millennials, and we'll drill down a little bit more momentarily. This is a group that has been bounced around a little bit economically, and they view work as a means to an end. In other words, work is a thing, it's not a place. It's something they do, and it's a work-life combination. It kind of flows more seamlessly. There are not hard boundaries here. Big on freedom and flexibility. Yes, they will change jobs, and they will change frequently. And then they're calling Gen 2020 here. This is Gen Z. This is a group, again, just magnify the trends brought on by millennials, and that is, while they want structure and stability, changing job is almost a gimme for them. Career is not the same as, let's say, it was for baby boomers, where career was a big deal. And one thing about millennials, they're also saying they don't want a boss, they want a coach. And that's a big deal. They also want purpose. They want to feel passion when they go to work. Work's not a job, work's part of their life. So it's important to remember that seamlessness. And then when you look at the profile of the workforce, again, Millennials are now, since 2016, have become the largest cohort of the workforce. Still plenty of Gen Xers right there with them, and Boomers also important. That's why they're your three primary. But again, as you think forward, Millennials are still increasing in size. And there's very interesting comparison when you look at you may have read Strength Finders. These are Gallup research that are done by generation. And you can see between baby boomers and Gen X, their profiles are kind of the same, different order, but they have different characteristics, if you would. The millennials are different on two big facets. Number one is empathy. Empathy shows up right near the top, and adaptability or flexibility is in there. You see less relator, and you don't see the strategic. And just elaborating on the empathy side, organizations are moving to understand the true emotions, what they really feel. It's a feel versus a think. And one group's using emojis for feedback and anonymity. It's a safer way to express your opinion, and for human resources and executives to find out what's going on in their company. I know that one of the large soda companies and one of the major broadcasting companies are using this. And interestingly, the company is Yayi, and their little tagline, empathy is the new intelligence. Very interesting, and that's directly at millennials. This is something that they respond to and is very important to them. And when you look at the need for adaptability and flexibility, again, flexible workspaces, working at home, I just expect this to be magnified given the coronavirus pandemic. I mean, they're doing it now. It's going to be an automatic at this point. So organizations need to think about models where they can find or strike that balance between many who want to be at home a bit, but they also want a social aspect. So you don't want to give up the social, and social needs to be more than being on Facebook or just doing texting. Of course, from a millennials standpoint, this is 2008, the Great Recession Redux. They're faced with unemployment again, mired in student debt. They also faced with pricey housing market. They're really feeling a double whammy right now. And what you're seeing, it's reflected that across generations, they're the ones that are cutting back the most on their spending. This was a survey done in March. They're the most worried about their finances. So it's something to consider. Even though they don't necessarily say they work for pay, it's still important for them. And what we're really finding from millennials is that almost 90% want to work for a company that has a purpose. And that is the major, major difference that we're finding with this generation. Elizabeth Davis, who spoke at the World Economic Forum, her data showed 60%. But what we see here is what they care about is they want to make an impact. They want to be active. And companies need, when you interview and you try to acquire talent and retain them, mission and purpose are the centerpiece of what you talk about. And that doesn't mean hocus pocus. It means a real mission and you have real purpose. And that's what elicits their passion. And we're finding that I noticed this X5 instead of 5 times. Millennials are over 5 times more likely to stay at a company where they feel this strong sense of purpose. So it's all integrated now. It's not just saying, oh, we'll give some dollars, to help the environment. And no, it has to be part of the fabric of the organization. And now it's moved to the C-suite. Business Roundtable, 180 CEOs got together and basically saying, you know what, it's not just about profits. We have to serve all Americans. Down in the lower right, Larry Fink, BlackRock, manages the largest money manager, like $6.8 trillion. Even they're saying that if you don't have a sense of purpose or direction for your company, It's not happening for this next generation and going forward. And along with this, though, it's not just nice to do. It's profitable. It's showing that the companies that have articulated a purpose platform, more of them are growing 10% versus fewer of them that are not. And the same thing show more drops in revenues with those who don't have a purpose versus 85% or show a positive growth. So this is real. It's real for organizations to think about. And again, this applies not only for corporations, but if you think about nonprofits, as you approach corporations, having a true purpose that aligns with funders and those you align with are very critical now. It's not just please help us, it's now we have to align. And this also plays out on sustainability market products, on consumer packaged goods. These kind of products make up only 16% of the market, yet they're accounting for half the growth. They're over delivering on their capabilities. And even we saw this, a study we did for the food side, healthier and lower calorie products are driving most of the growth. So again, having purpose, taking care of health and wellness, dealing with sustainability, these are all critical elements now as we look to go forward. Let me give you a quick case study of a company that I believe is doing a terrific job here. Unilever CEO basically made a stand. He took a stand. Every product will have a purpose. In other words, if it just washes your hair and cleans your hair, to jettison it. It doesn't do the job for us anymore. It has to stand for something, has to do something. It has to have an ancillary benefit behind just consuming that product. And they've set up what they call a sustainable living plan, where they've made some really serious commitments to improve health and well-being. Again, it's a big number for 1 billion people, and reducing their environmental impact by half in terms of greenhouse gases and waste and packaging. That's a big challenge for these companies. And of course, enhancing livelihoods like workplace fairness and opportunities for women and ethnic communities. And what we find, what they just did with the pandemic is they're offering over €500 million in cash flow relief to their vulnerable suppliers and to help small-scale retail customers. And then on top of that, throw in another €100 million to provide free soap, sanitizers, bleach, and food, with half of that going to the COVID action platform of the World Economic Forum. So this is big stuff. And the net, again, is their sustainable living brands grew 69% faster than the rest of the company's business. And so then they have proof of the pudding. And where it's also showing up for them is this is a ranking that Access to Nutrition Group does every year, ranks packaged goods companies on their corporate governance and their effectiveness, et cetera. And they're right up there with Nestle and Danone. Those are your three companies that have figured this out. So again, it's real. It's not hocus pocus. So let me transition to, it's really a critical moment in time to think beyond, say, what we've come to learn is corporate social responsibility. We started with charitable giving, which is passive. It's good to do stuff, and we need to continue doing that. Social responsibility became more active. In other words, we're tracking if we have emissions that go into the environment. But now we talk about results, delivering results, not just talking, but delivering the results. So when we talk about the model, it's basically organizations stepping up, owning problems that impact your industry or your organization, and more importantly, moving to fix it. Big difference here. So why do we do this? Let's recap why we care about social impact leadership. Well, first of all, wearing my marketing hat, it is differentiation. We don't see much of it. Again, there's a few examples like Unilever, but there's not a lot of it going on right now. And this is really a way to stand out. and it also would attract, motivate, and help retain employees, especially our millennials who care about purpose. Remember, 88% of them are saying, you know, we care about having a purpose at work. That's a big deal for them. We also saw that there's superior growth and profit potential in doing this. And finally, it does enhance an organization's credibility and reputation. So these are serious reasons for paying attention to this. And I want to give you examples of the kinds of things that can be done to start building a social impact leadership platform. Again, these are elements for each organization. You'd have to look in depth. But for one example, we actually put together a commitment for the confections industry to go public and say half of our items, half of our products by 2021 will be 200 calories or less. It's a very tough lift for them, and we track their progress. It's not a light commitment. Doing white papers. Here's a Cargill paper on plant-based protein solutions. I think they could have followed up on this. I think it's an area that is very ripe for a company to step up and own plant-based. Holding conferences or summits and owning an issue. So here's Georgia Pacific latching on to the recycling issue and taking a bold stance there. KPMG doing webinars and seminars, helping their clients find the way, help them navigate through the pandemic. Becoming a case study that goes into a Harvard Business Review or other publication. Again, these are huge credibility enhancing maneuvers. Some companies are set where they can do special innovation centers or a sustainability, food and sustainability type center. It doesn't have to be a big $5 million building, just where they earmark. They are putting extra emphasis behind that. And of course, doing op-eds in the major publications is a big deal. This is opinion. This is where you stand out. The days where we used to hide as corporations and organizations are gone. Now your employees are looking for you to step up and own issues. And finally, this is the most incredible, we call them BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals. Volvo's vision: no one should be killed or seriously injured in a new Volvo car by 2020. I can't even fathom this kind of vision for a company, but when they put that up on the boards, you can align your employees, get behind that. That's a huge deal. That's just fantastic for a company to make kind of a statement like that. So, closing, let's just get to a few key takeaways. It's really important to be in concert with your employees, their needs, their styles, their social interests. These are the big three right now that we talked about, and you can't ignore them. One size does not fit all. Dealing with boomers versus Gen X versus millennials is very different. But on the other hand, they're not separate. They're different, and there's a lot of synergies there. Again, we mentioned that your boomers can be mentors to the younger employees. That's important because the younger employers want more coach, they don't want a boss. And again, millennials are looking for real leadership. You know, they want transparency. They want to get behind and feel that purpose and feel that passion. And finally, taking the social impact leadership stance on issues is the key. It's really the key. And not only differentiate your organization, but get that passion behind your workforce. Again, I hope this is helpful. Please feel free to reach out to me. You can find me at Hudson Institute, or here's my email or website, and I'm more than happy to answer any further questions. This is so important, and I wish you all well in dealing with this pandemic right now, and stay safe. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Hank. I really appreciate you sharing all of your thoughts. My name is Allison Kimbrough, and I am the Managing Director of Business Engagement here at BVU. But a couple of things that I heard that were interesting that Hank talked about. Number one, in our workplace right now, we have 5 generations at work, primarily boomers, Gen Xers, and millennials. And so the boomers are really interested in serving as mentors, okay? And the Gen Xers are kind of that sandwich generation, and they crave kind of that work-life balance and really like the independence and autonomy. Versus millennials, they really consider work to be more of a thing and not a place. And there's really not any hard boundaries there. So they're not looking for a boss, but really they're looking for a coach, which I thought was very interesting. And then also another fact that Hank mentioned was approximately 90% of millennials want to work for a company with purpose. So those are all, I think, very interesting things as we kind of, get ready to move into our panel discussion here momentarily. One thing that I wanted to do is report back out to you the results from the first panel. So in terms of who we have on the call right now from a generation perspective, it looks like we have about 4% Gen Z, 48% millennials, 37% Gen Xers, and 11% boomers. So that's very interesting. I do have another polling question for you. I don't know if you can put that slide up for me, but basically the question is an active community and employee engagement program something you seek in a potential employer? And again, you can respond to this question in the live chat box on the landing page or within the Facebook platform. But right now, what we're going to do is we're going to take a 10-minute break. This will be a great opportunity for you to get up, stretch, grab a cup of coffee or a snack. And you'll see a countdown timer on the screen letting you know when we'll be back. But we'll see you in about 10 minutes. Thank you.
What is technology for? We believe it's for transforming the way you work, for delivering complete information when and where you need it, so you can be more agile, more empowered, and more connected through each interaction and in every relationship. Technology thoughtfully designed to create better customer experiences.
Dispensing, fluid management, testing and inspection, and surface treatment. This is what we do. But here's where you'll find us. You may not know us, but we're with you every day, everywhere. Nordson, Precision Technology Solutions.
All right. I hope everyone enjoyed their break. We'll go ahead and get started with the next section of our program. But before we begin that, just have kind of a fun question, as we all are kind of, struggling with the quarantine and all of that. What have been some of your go-to quarantine comfort foods? You don't mind just kind of posting some of those into the live discussion box? That would be phenomenal. And also just kind of to give you an update on what people said in response to, is an active community and employee engagement program something you seek in a potential employer? 100% of people said yes. So that is encouraging. Okay. One other question I have for you is, which type of volunteer opportunity are you most likely to engage in? And the selection of answers could be hands-on volunteering, donations or drives, skill-based or consultative volunteering, or board service. Again, if you'll submit your answer in the live discussion box below, that would be phenomenal. But now we're going to move into our panel section of the agenda. Essentially, our panelists will share their experiences overseeing community engagement initiatives, companies' philosophy around employee volunteerism, thoughts and opinions on how approaches to community engagement may or may not change in a post-COVID-19 environment. So our panelists today are Lorna Wisham, Kelly Keefe, and Hank Cardello. So Lorna is the Vice President of Community Outreach and Support for the Illuminating Company, where she leads the community giving and engagement initiatives, employee volunteerism, community board placements for executives, and serves as the president for the First Energy Corporation, or Foundation, I'm sorry. Kelly Keefe is the president of the Employee Resource Council, or ERC, and ERC has been helping leaders with their HR needs for 100 years this month. So happy anniversary. As a 501c6, ERC is an amazing resource that provides to its members an HR help desk, compensation data, and current survey data that allows leaders to compare their workplace practices to others. And you've heard from Hank, but basically Hank brings a perspective of over 3 decades of executive experience at some of the world's largest food and beverage companies, including Cadbury, Schweppes, Sunkist, Canada Dry, Coca-Cola, Anheuser-Busch, and General Mills. Okay. So let's go ahead and start our panel. Again, we really do want this to be an interactive session. So if any of the attendees have any questions, please feel free to type them into our discussion box. And we'll take those as we go throughout the process. So Lorna, we're not seeing you yet. There she is.
Good morning.
Okay, good morning. So let's talk about how different generations prefer to engage in volunteerism based upon their generational identification. So Kelly, I'm gonna start with you. Have you observed different generations find certain opportunities more appealing over others? So whether it's that hands-on volunteering, the donations or drives, the skill-based volunteering, or board service?
Thank you, Allison, and thanks for the opportunity to be here. I'm going to play off of Hank's session in the beginning that, yes, they absolutely do. When you're talking about volunteerism, you want to make sure that it's personal, and the more personal it is, the more engaged the employees are going to be. So absolutely, I would say different generations respond to different volunteerism efforts, obviously in different ways, what's meaningful to them. So I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more, but the answer to that is absolutely.
Awesome, thank you. Lorna, what have you observed?
Well, first of all, thank you, Allison and Brian, for the opportunity to participate on the panel. I'm glad that Hank went first. I was actually taking copious notes. It was great information to learn from. First Energy strongly believes that the greater good is better business. We have invested in our employees as well as the community for the last 20 years that the foundation has been in place. We've seen from feedback from our employees that their interest varies. We have regular support of our local food banks. We have regular support of personal volunteering where it comes to supporting their churches or homeless missions. So we find a way to support those employees with the organizations that they are particularly or personally engaged in. We think about that from a couple of different standpoints, and I'm sure we'll be able to talk a little bit more about it, but we've launched a recent program called the Employee Volunteer Program, and which includes paid time off to actually allow them to volunteer. So I'll be happy to talk about that a little bit more.
Yes, awesome, thank you. Thank you, Lorna. Yes, I would love to come back to that paid time off piece of it here in just a second. Hank, do you have a perspective on this?
Hold off what Lorna just said. We find that, especially with millennials, they want experiences. So the notion of paid time off and capitalizing on experiences or even travel as part of the work experience. Again, they want a seamless work life experience. So I think that speaks exactly to that particular group. What we also find is that at the boomers, from their perspective, when you look at their volunteering, they also need something purposeful, but perhaps with a different motivation, and that is, they're starting to think a little bit more about how they give back or what their legacy might be. So, again, you see volunteerism being important at both ends of the spectrum, but just for different reasons.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. So Lorna, if you wouldn't mind just kind of expounding a little bit on the concept of volunteer paid time off and what that means for your company and how your employees are responding to that.
Absolutely. Last year, we launched this employee volunteer program, which essentially has three components. The volunteer time off piece, which allocates 16 hours annually to every employee to use or lose for that matter, to volunteer in the community. It could be a corporate structured program volunteering. It could be their own personal time and interest volunteering. It could be a team charitable event volunteering as well. And we are seeing great success in that first year. We had well over 21,000 hours committed by employees volunteering during that time. And I just recently had the opportunity to have them provide some data for me with the number of employees that actually took advantage of that. And there was a pretty interestingly even split between Gen X and Gen Y. Gen X, it was about 36, almost 37% of our employees that actually engaged in the VTO program last year. And for Gen Y, it was about 32%. Baby boomers were right behind that at 29%. And then we had a small group of, I guess, what Hank referred to as the traditionalists or the silent generation. They were just under 1%. But the fact that they were out and engaged in volunteering last year is just tremendous in and of itself. So it really showed us when what's equivalent to essentially our employee makeup. We have a little over 12,000 employees. And when the balance of the employees between the Gen X and Gen Y or the Millennials group was about the same, that really shows us that the employee engagement and the opportunities to involve themselves in their own personal volunteering or through some of the corporate-wide events that we actually sponsor, they also will find ways to get out in the community and volunteer. So the VTO program has been a tremendous success. We expanded it this year to include two other components where we're recognizing those employees for their volunteer time as well. And depending on the amount of time that they invest volunteering, we have an opportunity to reinvest in the community on their behalf through another program, what we call Dollars for Doers or Volunteer Power Hours. So it seems to be going well. I know we're going to talk a little bit about the impact of COVID and how that's impacted the work with employee engagement and certainly charitable giving as well. And it's been interesting in this first quarter. So while 2019 was off to a tremendous start, it'll be interesting to see how 2021's out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that, Lorna.
Sure.
I just want to remind the audience that if you have any questions for any of our panelists, please feel free to type those in the live discussion box, and we will get those questions over to our panelists. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk from a recruitment perspective. How do or can businesses address engaging employees from different generations in community volunteerism in a thoughtful manner? So, for example, boomers versus millennials. Hank, do you have a perspective on that?
Yeah, I think you're talking, again, two very different mindsets, if you would. I think, first of all, what we learned is that the whole sustainability arena is an area that seems to be very meaningful to millennials and Gen Z. And anything you can do to bring in volunteerism in those areas, I think, again, it ties to purpose. We're talking about purpose here. And I think those would be topically areas that you can engender high interest in volunteering. Not that it doesn't exist across the other generations, but I think in that particular group, it's important. Interestingly, last year, I was invited to talk about healthy foods and movements like that, but the title of the conference was Sustainability, to capture everything. So that's pretty much where everything is going right now. Younger generations, again, feel like it needs to be embedded in their daily life. So the volunteerism can't just be a one-off. It has to get ingrained in what they do at work and at home, and then the volunteerism being a part of that. They don't quite see that as you get to baby boomers. Just to speak of that, it's something else they do. And perhaps, again, unless it's a legacy type of event where they're trying to make a serious impact, which many of them are trying to do, I could see them, again, doing that as a separate deal. Sustainability is important. You know, healthier eating and all that is so crucial, but maintaining your health, especially as you get older, and that's magnified now by the COVID-19 experience, people are paying more and more attention to that. So I think you can increase interest in volunteerism in that arena.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Kelly, do you have anything to share as it relates to that?
I would like to actually go back to the previous question around PTO, if that's okay, because I pulled out, ERC is the host of North Coast 99, which recognizes 99 of the best places to work in Northeast Ohio, according to our survey data. And I just wanted to share that 95% of last year's winners do allow employees to individually participate in nonprofit activities or in volunteerism activities. And then 2/3 of those organizations do give full pay. So much as Lorna was talking about what they're doing at First Energy, there's many other great organizations in Northeast Ohio that are doing the same thing, that the employees do not have to use their vacation or their PTO. So that's great for all the nonprofits that are on here today. And then going to the second question, I agree with everything that Hank said. And the only other thing that I was kind of thinking about is, younger generations, they want to work with for organizations that have a purpose, and not everyone can have this, amazing purpose. That we still need people to make widgets in the world, right? And so how are you as leaders making sure that your widget making is contributing to the greater good through your volunteer efforts and through your community efforts? So I guess I just wanted to add on to that as well. So no matter what you're doing, you can always do more for the community, and we still need those widgets being made. So.
That's true. That's what keeps the companies in business, right? So,
right.
Lorna, are you able to share an example when using generational bridging as a planning consideration led to a successful engagement program or event?
Can you repeat the question again? Generational?
Yes, of course. Yes, share an example when using generational bridging as a planning consideration led to a successful engagement program or event.
Well, it's interesting. Until I was asked to participate on this panel, we really had not approached volunteering or employee engagement from that perspective. We have had employees that have just responded to opportunities or knocked on the door and said, hey, there's a handful of us that are interested in participating in X. Will you support this? Will the foundation support it as well? So over time, there's been this groundswell, if you will, of employee engagement in the community. There, in the Akron area, for example, a number of events that the foundation has been a longtime partner for: the Akron Marathon, the Soapbox Derby, the American Heart Association Heart Walk, all very different types of activities and interests. The volunteers, the employee volunteers, cover the span of the generational groups that we're speaking about today. So it's really kind of difficult for us, for me to really answer that question and say that we go into a particular project thinking about it. What we're doing now through some new and dynamic work with our corporate social responsibility group is now really beginning to track through an external vendor platform what organizations our employees are actually volunteering with. So when they record their VTO hours, this year we're thinking a little bit further ahead. We're asking them to tell us what organizations they're volunteering with. And since the invitation to participate on this panel, I've actually asked them now to also, if possible, see if we can get them to indicate their age, so that as we start to look at the different kinds of organizations that are attractive to our employees, I at least then maybe a year from now can break down what those age groups look like.
Awesome, thank you. It looks like a question has come in for you, Lorna, from the audience.
Okay.
It said that you said, in reference to what you said about 12,000 employees, you guys having 12,000 employees at First Energy.
Yes.
They asked if you could expound a little bit on the total number of employees who have participated last year in the volunteer PTO program. I guess you shared percentages previously.
Absolutely. I'll take them by category if that's okay. So the baby boomer category, there were 6,194 hours of VTO time that was expended. About 29% of the employee base participated. The Gen X, there were 8,432 hours expended by the Gen X group. That was about 36% of the total percentage of total employees. And for the Millennials, it was a little over 6,400 hours of VTO time that was logged. And that was about 33% of employees. And then of course I mentioned the traditionalists, a very, very small percentage, and likewise a small percentage of the Gen Z as well. So our greatest numbers that we saw in total VTO hours, a little over 8,400 came from the Generation X group. And then second behind that was the Millennials, and the baby boomers were just behind that total too. So they were kind of neck and neck.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Thank
Sure.
you. Moving on to kind of retention. Once an employee becomes active in volunteerism, are there certain elements to consider in order to ensure continued generational engagement? Kelly, can I ask you that question?
Sure. I don't know if you're talking about specifically from the board. My experience is serving on a board, and what, I would say the one thing, and I've been active, 2 employees just went through the amazing BVU program this year, being placed with boards. And the one thing that I would say to the nonprofit leaders and to the boards is to make sure that you make a connection with that individual, because a lot of times once you find a new board member or a new volunteer, what's going to keep them connected with your organization is the personal interaction. There can be a great meaning behind the organization, but if I don't feel connected to somebody on there, I might not have the the stickiness to stay and to continue to donate my time. So I guess I'll take it from there. But I would also say leadership, you can't reiterate your expectations or your belief that your employees should be involved enough. Because as soon as that big project comes around, or as soon as bonus time comes around, or whatever it may be, if your employee is choosing between, are they supposed to be doing this project, or are they supposed to be volunteering, you need to be able to communicate to them. Maybe sometimes things are put on hold, but the more that you're communicating as an executive team, then to the leadership team, and then to individual supervisors, the philosophy of what you believe in as an organization. I would also say, I'm sure Lorna, if they haven't done this at First Energy, they're about to, you need to put it in writing, and then you need to share that policy and that belief with your employees, because you can't just say it at a staff meeting, we're dedicated to everyone being committed to volunteerism, or, we're committed to this event done in a day. And then it's, 364 days later and we haven't heard anything about it again. So I would say it's leadership's responsibility to make sure that you are reiterating the message, whatever that message may be, as to what you believe in, both as individual leaders, but then also for the organization spread out amongst the employees.
Awesome, thank you. Hank, do you have a perspective on that?
Yeah, I'd like to amplify what Kelly was saying. I think it's putting it in writing for sure, because that makes it real. And then also companies that actually make hard commitments. In other words, using the volunteerism to achieve goals, and then you measure those goals. You actually put the commitment in writing and you track the progress over time. That, to me, really guarantees that things do happen and they go in the right direction. And again, they reinforce the company's mission and purpose. So it all ties together that way. I think attaching metrics to what you do are very, very critical for them to be real effective.
Thank you. Thank you. Lorna, is there anything that you would want to add there?
Yeah, absolutely. The decisions to establish the VTO policy were largely driven by inquiries or questions from shareholders and from investors and from our employees that were looking at other organizations and saying, hey, I think, this would be great if we could really have some sort of organized effort around our employee volunteerism. So yes, the leadership said, we are definitely going to do this, and put the VTO policy in place last year. We are seeing more and more engagement, a lot of it, as I said before, driven by the employees themselves. And we, in our group of corporate affairs and community involvement, the group that I head up, we also find ways to supplement that support through support with the foundation itself. So we want to reemphasize and reinforce the importance of community engagement and the active interest of all of our employees. One of the foundation priorities, for example, is to support employees where in their volunteer interest and leadership, particularly where it aligns with our business interests. So where we have executives or even managers serving on boards or participating on community councils or young professional groups that are, the active arm of some of the nonprofit organizations, we support them. If there are opportunities for dinners or galas or walkathons, we'll find ways to support them. And it's important to us. And I think the feedback has been for most of the employees, at least in the last little over a year that I've been in this role, has really been very positive. It has said to us that we're on the right track, that the more we think about how else we can involve our employees corporate-wide, where we take a look at a number of the corporate-wide programs that we offer internally that engage employees externally, we're hearing more and more that is the direction that they want us to go in. So we've expanded the priorities and our focus, thinking more about diversity and inclusion, thinking more about sustainability, and really driving the interest and intentional engagement in our community around those areas.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So one of the things that we see is that millennials really do want leadership opportunities. And so a question for all of you, whoever wants to answer first, do you find that millennials really want to serve on boards?
Yes. Can I take that?
Please.
I've had board placements is part of what I engage in through my work. And I hear more from executives that are rotating off of boards and interested in getting on another board. I hear from supervisors about engaging some of their managers, typically younger in age, about getting involved in the community. How can I get them on a board? What will it take? And I think all of us participating on this panel understand that that ask is kind of a two-way street. Sort of what the nonprofits or the organizations actually need. And usually their interest is in more seasoned, experienced employees. Nothing wrong with that. That's absolutely great. I kind of think I fall in that category. So I totally get what board governance leadership is looking for. But I think there is such great opportunity for engaging millennials and younger professionals on councils or committees, particularly if it's a pathway to a board seat. If it's not designed that way, I would encourage nonprofits to really think about that, because their energy and passion and commitment, at least from what I've seen from the employees at First Energy, is fantastic. And I would certainly want that as if there was any interest from the younger generation.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Lorna.
Sure.
Kelly, do you have something to add?
Yeah, personally, I give a lot of credit to junior boards. That helped me throughout my career. In fact, a few of the opportunities I helped to develop the junior board. So for any of the nonprofits out there, I would encourage you that if you don't have a junior board, to start thinking about that and make it social, make it engaging, make it everything that Hank talked about that millennials are looking for. And I think that that will be a great feeder into your board eventually, because I know that, some boards, there's a financial commitment that not everyone can bring to the table. And then also millennials don't have that experience yet. So give them that experience. From the employer side, the more that an individual is exposed to things outside of their daily ritual, the more of an engaged employee they will be, more well-rounded, I should say. When I think back about what board experiences gave to me as a professional outside of my actual job, is it taught me patience. It taught me how to deal with different generations, how to know when to speak and know when, I should be listening. So I think, as the more that you participate in a board and encourage that with your employees, the more well-rounded you will have. I will also say the development side of things, you can get some coaches that you wouldn't have received outside your organization, coaches for whatever it may be, professionalism, dress, anything like that. That's what boards can help encourage. But also, and I know BVU does an amazing job with this, the role of the board. There are so many applicable takeaways from sitting through the role of the board. And I will say I was able to do that as a young professional, and I give a lot of credit to what I learned in those sessions to not only apply to boards, but then also apply to my life and to my workplace. So I think the development side of things. The other thing I want to add is through the employer resource groups, or by giving an individual who might not be in a leadership position the opportunity, if they raise their hand and they say, I want to start some sort of community activity, think about the leadership opportunity that you're giving that employee without giving them a raise, without making a big to-do about it, and see how that employee does and how they evolve. And so take some pressure off of leadership and push it down onto the employees, especially the millennials, to give them some more leadership opportunities.
Yep, thank you for that. Hank, looks like you have something you'd like to add as well.
Yeah, I just want to add, building on Kelly's points there, I think the notion of mentoring is very crucial inside organizations. And again, we talked about, for instance, boomers being available. You have experienced people there that could help the younger generations see all facets, not just about the job, but be more broad than that, cover board issues, outside issues, et cetera, and to help them along, because I still see a gap there. We've given it good lip service over the years, but corporations and organizations have a tremendous opportunity to spend a lot more executive time or seniority time helping our younger employees come along. I think that's one area that definitely needs to be nurtured even more. And I also think you have the elements in place right now where the baby boomers, for example, want to do this, and the younger employees need it and are asking for it. Give me an opportunity, let me show my stuff, and get some guidance, and not have it be judgmental. We're not judgmental at this stage. We're just trying to expose and give you opportunities. So I think it's all right there. It's just putting in place. And don't treat it like an adjunct to your business. Integrate it into what you're doing as an organization. I think that's a difference than just, oh, okay, over here we do some volunteerism. No, integrate it into everything you do.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you for that. We've had another question come in from the audience. And it is, while earning and retention is better if you have a company with purpose, how does the C-suite react to this? We see that some get it, but many still don't. How would you guys respond to that?
I'll jump in there on that. Since I like to use a model as my original training was in metallurgical engineering. So I kind of view people and organizations kind of like materials. You're either a solid, liquid, or a gas. And many organizations can be very stuck and solid, if you would. And they don't promote change. And I think those are difficult organizations to bring along. Even seeing things like, we see it in the food industry, selling healthier foods, even though it's more profitable for them and they grow more, they're not jumping on it because, no, this has worked for us for 40 years. I mean, why am I going to change it? And yet, so it's very important, almost like training for the younger ones to understand what to look for in an organization. What kind of organization will be more primed to accept your ideas for change and be open to those kinds of changes. Very critical. You can get very frustrated very quickly, especially for the younger generation right now if they bump into an organization. You could be making widgets and still be enlightened. I think that's the key. It's not the product you sell, it's how you do it. And I think there's a huge opportunity to educate on that front, maybe even taking that down to the college level, if you would. Not only just, and that could be part of the volunteerism to help teach courses locally at your universities in Northeastern Ohio, to show them, hey, this is the kind of thing you need to look for. It's not just a company or what they sell or what they say, but it's the environment, and is it a nurturing environment for you? And again, we've just seen the whole range of companies, and they're so different. So huge opportunity again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that. Going back to the concept of employee resource groups, how can an active employee resource group, or ERG, enhance or aid generational engagement within companies?
I can share a little bit about that. I was just thinking about, we refer to them as executive business resource groups, so EBRGs, and they are extremely active within the company. And what we have found is that a number of them actually have established their own community involvement committees within their executive business resource group. Some of them span, again, the gamut with respect to age. So outside of the young professionals, which is technically a club for us and not necessarily an EBRG, they, for example, have established a social, I just want to write it on my head, as a community involvement committee. And we engage them on a regular basis with respect to community events, to whether it's as simple as attending events, being able to go and engage and attend events where there are other executives and they can take advantage of opportunities of interacting with executives they don't typically engage with, as well as involving them on our employee volunteer council. So recently, we met with a number of young professionals and asked them about participating on a subcommittee group that helps us think about the direction that we're going in with respect to employee involvement. What kinds of activities, what kinds of programs should we be involved in corporate-wide? So it gives them or empowers them with the opportunity to create interesting programs that they think their generation and the future generation of this company would be interested in doing. So it has been quite interesting. You know, the EBRGs, getting the employees involved in charitable team events. We have a number of community involvement centers where employees can actually come and provide donations that we distribute to various communities, whether it's clothes or books or toys, kind of depending on what the needs are within the community. And that interest has really developed more engagement, I think, by the millennials, and certainly more support by some of our baby boomers or Gen Y as well, or Gen X as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Hank, I have a question that came in for you, specifically related to the Business Roundtable. Why do you think that they took the stand that they did? They're glad to see that they did, but they're surprised by it.
I was a little surprised by it also. But I think, again, the evidence is showing up now that more and more companies, again, we gave a specific case here with Unilever. We're seeing it more in the food industry for sure. And, you know, there are other examples. Nestle and Danone are two specific examples where we're seeing that the ones who are stepping out, making commitments, getting more involved in sustainability and also health and well-being in the broadest context, their growth rates are higher than the rest of their industry sectors. So and then you're seeing what used to happen, maybe 5-10 years ago, they'd have these sustainable investment funds that were starting to come up for investment purposes. And people did it mostly because they wanted to do good rather than worrying about the results. Well, now what's happening is the serious investors are looking at that saying, you know what, these companies are performing better than their peers. And that gives them an imperative to get behind these industries. So that was the motivation behind it. It's not a kindness. You know, I always look at it from a corporate standpoint. I don't really care your motivations as long as you do the right thing. And they've finally figured out that doing the right thing is also good for their business. So that's why they jumped on board with that.
Okay, awesome.
Can I add a little something to that, Hank? I'm sure, I know that I've read some statistics that show that not only the organizations that are tied to sustainability and to the community, but those organizations also have diversity is very important to them, from all different, races to genders to all of that. And so I would say that this all kind of plays in together, that those organizations that are leading the way and are seeing the profits come in are thinking differently than maybe some of their competition.
Yeah, I mean, if I can give an example, even though they're a nonprofit, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, for instance, has focused their entire efforts around what they call health inequities, which basically impacts what they describe as more vulnerable populations, where you get to children, low income, certain ethnic populations, et cetera, where they wrap their entire mission around that. And that's tying in some of our earlier conversation. That's how they attract people to come into the organization. In essence, what they do every day is volunteerism, even though it's their job. They've welded those two together. So exactly what you're saying, it's sustainability is very simple to lock into, but it's the broader topics, health, well-being, sustainability, income inequalities, health inequalities, go down the list. And that was the point I was trying to make very early in my presentation, that all this has been magnified now under the coronavirus pandemic, because we're all seeing that, hey, everything we do impacts everything else. You know, those who suffer from income inequality now really suffer, and they don't have access to good health. So again, it's all tied together, and I think this is a message now that needs to go up to the next level, which is why we're saying the social impact leadership is a very important aspect of the way corporations and organizations need to think, to weave it all together, because it's integral now. There's no separation.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I had some survey results come in about the how people prefer to volunteer. And it looks like we are pretty even from a donations and board service perspective at, looks like, I think about 25% apiece. Consulting, so like pro bono consulting at about 50%. And then the rest of it would be hands-on volunteering. So that's kind of interesting information. So I have a question for maybe we'll start with Lorna. How do you recognize what people have learned from volunteering into performance reviews and discussions, and when looking at talent to promote?
Well, I can tell you, I've just concluded interviews last week for an open position that I have. And we have an internal system that is called a talent profile. It allows you to identify your strengths, your weaknesses, certainly your professional experience currently at First Energy and any past work experience. But there's also a section for community involvement. And one of the key things that was important to me, because I've actually hired for 4 positions over the last 2 months, was to go straight to that section to see if before you were interested in coming to this group, were you already interested and engaged and involved in the community? Have you served on boards? In what capacity and for how long? Are you volunteering through any of the corporate-wide programs that we have? United Way campaign, the Harvest for Hunger campaign. Have you volunteered on any of the major corporate events that we sponsored? Like I mentioned earlier, the Soapbox Derby and the Accra Marathon. Are you engaged in an EBRG? Show me, as a potential employer of yours, if you are actually interested in volunteering and engaged in the community. It has been quite an eye-opening experience. One, a good lesson for those that have been actively involved in the community. I have circled back with them and said, it would be great if you updated your talent profile, because supervisors sit in a room, and at the time of promotion and hiring, we are considering all kinds of tools to make the decision as to whether or not to engage you on any particular special projects or opportunities to job shadow if there is, if that's available to you. But certainly, most certainly, to consider any kind of promotion. So yes, it is considered internally. We do absolutely look at it. We think that, honestly, this is, again, a two-way street. There are check-in responsibilities for supervisors where we have the opportunity to pose these kinds of questions. But it's also the employee's responsibility to ask those questions and track their interest and growth and development as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
I wanted to.
Go ahead.
I was just going to. Lorna brought up something that I did neglect to mention when I went through the differences, and that is when you look at millennials, there's less desire to talk about weaknesses and more desire to talk about
Oh, yes.
But I think, again, understanding that helps us
yes.
get into alignment again. I mean, ultimately, when the day is done, alignment is the best place to be, because that ultimately generates the passion, and it also benefits the organization too when you engender that kind of passion. So again, it's just something that popped up to me in reviewing the research on millennials, that don't tell me what you don't do, just tell me what I'm great at.
Very, very true.
Yeah. Hank, actually, I had a question come in that asked if you could restate that nonprofit that you spoke about before that focuses on health inequity.
Yeah, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation.
Thank you.
Just the initials rwjf.org.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, will the coronavirus circumstances change the positive momentum of companies? So, for example, income will probably drop, and of course, time is very precious. Kelly, do you mind kind of commenting on that?
So your question is will coronavirus impact positivity within organizations? Is that correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. I will say, just as a leader myself, it's things are harder right now. And I know that we're all saying it feels like Groundhog Day, but at the same time, I feel like we are working harder than we've ever worked. You know, as Brian said in the beginning, you know, a lot of nonprofits right now, you can't even volunteer your time. So if people were used to giving back and having that face-to-face, I know we are spinning our wheels in my own family to try to find ways for us to give back. And I'm sure that many of you on this call are doing the same thing. So continue to stretch yourself to find ways, because there are little glimpses of hopes of ways that you can. In addition to, you know, obviously donations, which are very needed right now. But, you know, it is hard. Cash is tight for almost every organization right now. And so how do organizations continue to make their workplaces a happy and a safe place? Because we all as individuals really need that right now. And so it's a tall challenge for leaders of nonprofits, for for-profits, for each employee to do their part. And, you know, it doesn't just have to be the leaders. You know, who are the heroes amongst your peers that are lifting you up on days that are hard? When I think about what some of my employees, I have 3 children, but the youngest one is 10. When I think about some of my employees that have twins that are 2 years of age, and then a 6-month-old baby, and they're also trying to work full time. And then, you know, some organizations, the expectation that you're going back to work, but there's no childcare and there's no family member that can help watch these children. So the stress that individuals are feeling right now is unprecedented, right? And so we need to work together day by day, minute by minute almost, to figure this out. So will it be harder? Is it harder? Absolutely. But as we've been saying through this whole time, and I know this is at the heart of BVU, the more that you give of yourself to other individuals, the easier that this will be. So I would say, you know, encourage, continue, you know, nonprofits, if there's opportunities for people to give in ways, drop-offs, whatever it may be, you know, share that with your board members so they can share that with their employees. And then also I would say, as leaders of organizations, find ways to continue to connect with your employees.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Kelly. Another question is related to Gen Zs. So they are now starting to enter the workforce, and there are some differences in what they value compared to millennials. What does the research tell us we should focus on to engage and retain Gen Z that we might not think of for millennials? Hank, you want to take that one?
Sure. I mean, I still believe that having, engendering that passion and having a mission that they can align with is still there. I think it's more the style that's different rather than, let's say, purpose, because I think purpose is still important. So the style is, again, they're coming in, it's almost like career is just something else on the screen, as opposed to, let's say, when baby boomers came in, it was about my career. All right, and I would bust my tail, and that's what I did. Millennials still believe in their career, but they want to do it their way. When you get to Gen Z, it's like, oh, what, you know, it's one of those things I do, and it's kind of this round table options that I might think about. And it's very clear that they indicate they're going to be changing a lot. Change is the minimum ante here. If I don't change, I'm not with the program. So I think that gets a little bit more difficult for organizations to continue to find ways to retain talented Gen Zs. And again, I think it goes back to volunteerism. I think is very critical in that, because they're the ones like millennials that really do care about environment, healthiness, and equities, et cetera. So I think having a core mission and demonstrating your leadership, that social impact leadership there, is going to be very important for that group as it is for millennials. I think the key, though, again, is keeping them attentive enough in here so that they don't run off and want to change again. I think that's the big challenge for organizations.
For sure, for sure.
I just want to add something to that, Allison, if that's okay.
Yep.
You know, as Hank said, there was different life events that created the different generations and how they view the world. We really have not experienced this as all of the generations at one time, 4 generations in the workplace experiencing the same major event, and a very traumatic event. So I wonder in some ways if this is going to help kind of meld the organization, the generations together, because we're going to have to work through this together from all different, backgrounds and experiences, and we're all going to have our own stories. So as we come out of this, encourage each other to share those stories and to figure out how we can work together, moving forward.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Lorna?
Yes. I was just checking my notes here, and we have a little less than 2% of our employees, about 235 in total, that fall within that Gen Z category. And but what I heard Hank say was that maybe the common through line still touches upon volunteerism. So if there's an interest or way to engage some of the Gen Z employees that we have in the community or around volunteerism, I think that may be a good place to start. And once hopefully you get them involved and they see the how important community engagement is a part of the fabric or the culture of the company, in this case First Energy, that they will want to stick around a little bit and see exactly where this might go. I always suggest that you think about what I call the 3 T's: your time, your talent, and your treasure. And in this stage with this pandemic, just as Kelly said, it is literally bringing all of these generations together to try to think about how do we address it, how do we approach it, looking at virtual volunteering opportunities that are out there. I think from the baby boomer standpoint, you begin to leverage the experience and the skills that you have already developed as a professional, and see if the nonprofits that you're either serving on or have a passion or an interest for can use your expertise to help them through with crisis communication or any kind of risk management discussion points. If it's hands-on, you've got a little bit of time and creativity, and technology is your friend. Find a way to see if any of the organizations can utilize your skills through technology. And then cash is always king, as Kelly said. A number of the foundations, such as myself, the pandemic hit in the month of March. We were 10 days into our Harvest for Hunger campaign, which was largely employee driven. We had to suspend all activities. And then by the middle of the month, everyone was working from home remotely. But First Energy employees still kicked in, and we were good, about 63, 64% of our goal. It was really impressive, quite commendable, considering everyone was scattered all over in their respective places. But we established a virtual money pool, and we were driving employees toward the pool to help virtually raise money. And then likewise, you just begin to think about what else can you do from a philanthropic or charitable giving standpoint. But those 3 things: time, talent, and treasure are the three things I think that will make a difference.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Lorna, you got a compliment, and it was in response to the fact that First Energy has that volunteer PTO policy. And of course, they would love if you're willing to share any of your language that they might be able to implement in their company. So,
I don't know if there's a way to, if I could share my email address, or if you're sharing information or contact information on the panelists. But anyone is free to email me at lwisham, WISHAM, at firstenergycorp.com. So we can certainly have a dialogue about that. I will connect them with HR, our corporate social responsibility group, and see about sharing the PTO policy with you.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Well, I appreciate all of the feedback and the knowledge and the insight that you guys have all shared today. I think it's been so valuable. And it looks like the audience has been very engaged. There have been a lot of questions that have come in from them. So again, thank you so much for your time as it relates to that. Again, Lorna, the work that First Energy is doing with the volunteered paid off or time off, with their employees, and the fact that the employees are really kind of they're embracing this, right? They're utilizing it, says a lot, right? So thank you for that. And Kelly, the fact that the research that you've done with the North Coast 99, it shows that many businesses are actually kind of taking that approach as well, right? So what did you say? I think about 95% of businesses that you guys, that they're doing it as well. So that's phenomenal. And then, I also really appreciate you guys talking about like millennials and how they might get involved on boards, or, maybe some things that they might do kind of to develop some skills to be able to be prepared to be involved on boards, such as, participating on committees or junior boards or things like that, where it's a great way for them to get experience. And also it's a great development opportunity for them. And out of that, they may also receive some sort of coaching that maybe they might not have received inside their organization. So it's just kind of a different perspective. So thank you for that as well. And then Hank, just all of the information that you've shared, first of all, around, the fact that sustainability, right, is important to millennials and Gen Zers, which is all, of course, tied to purpose. And the fact that they are really ingrained in their work and what they do, and how all of that plays together. Thank you so much for sharing your insights on all of that. At this time, Brian Broadbent is going to jump back on, and he's going to kind of share a few other reflections here as well.
Yeah, first of all, Hank, Lorna, Kelly, that was awesome. Great input. We really appreciate it. Your perspectives were all very different and very helpful. And it's funny, Allison and I we were all going to have our bullet points of kind of takeaways. And Allison, you took away 2/3 of my bullet points. I mean, Hank, your stats were awesome. Like the earning per share stats, the retention stats, the 5X, the millennials, 90% want purpose. We're hearing that at BVU all the time. Because a lot of companies have been drawn to us. I don't know that senior management was pushing it, but millennials were pushing it. And so it's been a good day for BVU because of that generation and their interest.
Yes.
And the other thing is we're finding people want to get involved with high-end volunteering. All volunteering is good, but like boards using their professional skills to do consulting, millennials really like that. And we're seeing that as well. And the whole idea of the sustainability events, focusing on that. We had a program last year where Aaron Markovia of our staff put a number of our volunteers in boats, and they went up the Cuyahoga River, that's our local river, and picked up trash out of the river. People loved it. It got sold out like that. I think we're going to do it again this year. It was just a wonderful event. Kelly, I was reflecting on that North Coast 99 piece as well as the 95% have that. and that 2/3 of the companies are giving people time off to volunteer. We're seeing the same thing, and those numbers are starting to go up, even the number of hours in volunteering, which is great. And junior boards, great idea. We have one at BVU, and we love them. It's just a high energy group.
Yep.
Lorna, First Energy is a big company, right? But you've got the way you're empowering your ERGs. That's a huge takeaway for me. Let the employees decide direction. I mean, you're the leader of the band, but by giving them that power, that seems to help out a lot. And obviously the 3 T's and leveraging that is great. So I can't thank you enough. So, okay, we'll wrap up. So here's my call to action out of all of this. We hope you learned a lot, and it's hard being on a 2-hour webinar. We realize that, but we hope for yourself personally, and then for your businesses, because there's so many business leaders on this program, that you take something out of it. And I reflect on, in 2008 and 2009, we had another crisis, the financial crisis. And at BVU, we were worried our business members would disappear. That BVU is nice in good times, but when things get tough, we might be shed. And surprisingly, that was not the case. Our business members hung in with us during that period because they wanted to have good answers and have programs for their people to get involved for all the reasons the 3 panelists just mentioned. And we think that'll be the case now. We're kind of hearing it already, but time will tell the story on that. The other thing is, we're going to have to be able to respond because of these canceled events for the nonprofits, fundraising's down. They're going to be going through HR reorganizations with reduced headcounts. They're going to have to do their own financial planning, scenario planning. That all requires business skills. And so people on boards and that people who volunteer doing pro bono consulting are going to be needed now more than ever. And so the thing I would encourage you, because I'd say 90% of the people on the call are BVU members, 10% aren't, but we're going to have very targeted ways for you to stay involved, to answer these problems. Like, we keep a good data set of what the nonprofits need, and we're going to keep that up because it's going to evolve very quickly, and we have to stay on top of that. So thank you for all of the input from the speakers. I also want to just thank our sponsors once again for doing this. Falls Communications, they're the ones that had recommended Hank to us. And wow, Kat, that was a great recommendation. And then Bill with Highland and all the work you're doing is great. And Nordson, GBX, Jones Day, Key Bank. I mean, these are some real leaders in terms of what they do in the community across a lot of different programs. We're just grateful, for all the work you did. And then finally, we have a couple of upcoming events. And if we can have the slide that shows that, if you would, Molly. Let's see. Molly, I don't know if you can hear. Here we go. I see her putting the slides up there. Basically, what we have a number of things to help people get involved. And we're going to have to be very sensitive to, we're not going to be able to gather groups the way we used to. So for instance, we have a summer service program where people can volunteer, and our sense is your people are going to want to volunteer in a big way when the time comes. But the big way is going to be groups of 10 or less. Social distancing will apply. So instead of one big volunteer event for summer service, which we're going to have 3 different dates through the course of the summer, we're going to have many different locations. We have a business partner breakfast, which many of you participate in, and we can share a topic and talk about it. I'm sure it'll be about this virus, and we've got one coming up in June and October. The board training that you know about is coming up in September and December. And Bernie Moreno is going to be our local leader on June 25th for our what we call Cocktails with Champions, which is targeted for young professional people. And Ask the Expert is having business people do pro bono consulting for nonprofits. And I know we need more business people with certain skill sets. We've got 9 nonprofits lined up that have issues they want to talk about, so we'd love to have you do that. And Linking New Leaders is our speed dating event to help people get on committees, these YP groups Kelly was talking about, as well as boards. And that's going to be on May 5th, and we're going to have to do it virtually. But we have that coming up. So those are some of our events. We'd love to have you participate in those. And then the final thing is we have some giveaways. And let's see if I've got some names. I have to bounce back and forth between my computer and my phone here. Okay, so Allison Brunson from ERC gets the GBX prize, which is a gift basket. And Julie Ray is going to be getting the Falls prize. And what Falls is doing is basically an hour or two of consulting. And it's on social impact and a leadership audit, which they're just a pros. And so Kat and the Falls people, thank you for doing that. And so those are the prizes. So with that, we are done. Thanks for attending the webinar and hanging with us. And again, thanks for all of our leaders and sponsors. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.